World War I stands as one of the most consequential and devastating conflicts in all of history. Yet for all its famed lore, some lesser-known stories beggar belief. From sea monsters to trench ghosts, from Templar knights to crafty cables. Welcome to History on Fleek. Today we examine the most staggering events of World War I. The First World War was titled so as much for the number of nations involved as for the global expanse it covered. Yet, outlandish as this sounds, there was an unexpected cameo from one group who rose to the battle. Crusade-era knights. I kid you not. In the spring of 1915, some months after Russia had declared war against Turkey, the governor's house in the Georgian capital of Tbilisi had some surprise visitors. Arriving on horseback, a band of chainmail-covered, shield and broadsword-carrying men arrived in Tbilisi. They had one question. Where's the war? People were reportedly as spellbound as they were confused. There was a war on. This was no cinema production being filmed, and somehow 900-year-old Knights of the Crusades had arrived. These knights were known as Khevsurs, descendants of the medieval Crusaders. Their armor bore both the Crusades' cross and their motto. Unfathomably spirited, these descendant knights had shown up to fight World War I in Crusader armor. The Khevsurs would fight alongside the Russians in World War I, though they were probably given a change of uniform and arms beforehand. The First World War was a conflict that covered the globe from Europe to the Indian Ocean, from the Middle East to the Pacific Islands, yet it could have spread even further. One single secret communication nearly threatened to bring the war to a further continent, and would in turn blow the war wide open. In January 1917, the German Foreign Office sent a secret diplomatic cable to Mexico. The note, which was soon to be known as the Zimmermann Telegram, prospected a military alliance between Germany and Mexico as a safeguard against the U.S. entering the war. Most scandalously, it proposed that Mexico could recover Arizona, Texas, and New Mexico from the U.S. with Germany's support. At the time, Mexico was in a civil war and even set up a commission to see if Germany's lavish promises could be counted upon. Mexican military generals concluded for an array of reasons it was not. As much for the challenge it presented Mexico as Germany's financial support could not be counted on. An alliance was entirely unlikely from the telegram, but the twist in the tale was it being intercepted and decoded by British intelligence. This decryption has been called by many the greatest success of British intelligence during the entire war. Once the telegram content had been shared with the Americans, they were outraged, and ironically, it sped up their joining Allied forces in the war. An incredible tale of the war belongs to the story of U-Boat 85. The submarine was stalking the North Channel, preying on any British ships that would have been passing the Atlantic. When the most fantastical of tales unfolded, Captain Crash stood atop the U-boat's conning tower with his crew to scan the waters in the moonlight when the sub was powerfully shunted on the starboard side. When Captain Crash looked down, he sighted a giant sea monster wrapping itself on the side of the submarine. Crash stated the beast had large eyes and a horned skull, and that every man on deck began unloading their firearms into the beast. The Leviathan from the deep had gripped the forward gun mount and would not let go until reams of bullets had been fired. While the crew were safe from the animal, the forward deck had been ravaged, leaving the U-boat incapable of submerging. The Royal Navy would discover the U-boat afloat with not a single crewman putting up a fight. They were taken off in rowboats before the U-85 was sunk. What a tale, huh? Yeah, until you find out that Captain Crash made the whole thing up. What a guy. A little investigation of the crew members by the Royal Navy soon put the captain's tale to shame. It was revealed he insisted on a heater being installed in the officer's compartment. For this to be so, cables powering the heater ran through the control room through the conning tower, meaning it couldn't be sealed. So water could flow freely from the conning tower into the sub. Had the cables not been there, only the conning tower would have flooded, and the sub would have been fine. The UB-85 lies at the bottom of the North Channel to this day. But it's not because a mythical monster joined World War I, no. It's because some guy wanted to keep his feet warm. What may be the indelible imprint on history from World War I, the Battle of the Somme, symbolizes the war's most devastating human cost. The Great War had the dubious honor of introducing advanced machine technology to warfare, from machine guns, and in the case of the Somme, the debut of the tank. Resulting from this war was a loss of life on a scale never seen before in the theater of combat. From July of 1916 to November, Allied forces suffered over 3,000 casualties per day. In just 5 months, the mortality rate of the battle simply astonished the watching world. The Allied casualties topped 900,000. The German casualties topped 700,000. Yes, with 3 million soldiers drawn to the battle, over half were wounded or killed. The Somme has since become a mythic byword for the futility of war. To this day, the mud, blood, and barbed wire of the Battle of the Somme remains one of the most lethal battles in recorded history. Understandably, the human cost of the Great War cemented its ghastly status as the war to end all wars. Oh, 1914, how little did you know? Yet, this was not just a conflict that brought devastation to a previously unimaginable scale. It brought swaths of fundamental change all over the globe. Across the war, world events unfolded beyond the theater of armed conflict. Look no further than the Ottoman Empire's genocide of the Armenian population. Genocide scholars estimate the number of Armenians slain at the hands of the Ottoman Empire to be 1.5 million lives lost. Yet this was not the only event of human decimation. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 overthrew the Tsarist government and formed the Soviet Union. However, the overthrow was a bloody and life-costing turn of events. Following the revolution, civil war unfolded in Russia, costing 7 to 12 million lives, predominantly civilians. The story of Jewish persecution would rear its ugly head throughout the Civil War, with some 60,000 to 200,000 Jewish civilians slain in pogroms. Speaking of world-altering and life-costing global events, the Spanish flu would unfold upon the globe in 1918 towards the close of the war. Governments and the press at the time played down the extent of the pandemic to avoid hampering war morale, but the human cost was marked. Some 25 to 50 million lives were lost to the illness. Last but hardly least of the world-changing events from this conflict was the collapse of empires. The Ottoman Empire and Austro-Hungarian Empire, who sided with Germany in the war, all but folded following the defeat. Much of the map which had been their territory was partitioned and redrawn with new national borders. Entire new nations were born. Like a tale of the supernatural and paranormal, World War I can help you with that. Across the war, there were numerous accounts of eerie happenings and supernatural sightings by soldiers in the trenches. These included seeing ghostly soldiers, unexplainable noises, and witnessing mysterious lights. Now, I'm sure many of you are thinking, weren't all these soldiers burnt out and broken with fatigue and trauma? Well, most likely that is the explanation for this phenomenon. However, one story in particular even made it into print. On August 23rd of 1914, British forces were fighting the invading forces of Germany at Mons, Belgium. Unfortunately for the British, they were severely outnumbered and soon in the depths of a casualty rate they simply could not sustain. The following day, the British were forced to retreat. At this point, the supernatural made its presence known. According to several soldiers' accounts, a ghostly apparition appeared blocking the German advance and protecting the British retreat. Some accounts claimed a spectral cloud. Others claimed ghostly visions of St. George and mounted knights, while some claimed they saw ghostly bowmen. The British press would tell and retell the tale, as the British survived what seemed an impossible retreat, and the Angel of Mons was born. Maybe this is the true lesson to be learned from World War I, that, quite sadly, it appears the world hasn't taken so much. In a poetic and beautiful unfolding of events, 5 months after hostilities began on Christmas Eve of 1914, a ceasefire began. This was not mandated. No government or commanders gave orders for ceasefires. The individuals in the trenches made this happen. The German soldiers began by placing candles across their trenches and on Christmas trees. They shortly began singing Christmas carols. Shortly after, the British began singing Christmas carols from their side of the trenches. What began as a carol-off soon escalated to both sides shouting Christmas wishes at one another, and somehow, in the most bloody conflict yet seen to man, war was forgotten. Soldiers crossed no man's land unarmed to exchange gifts of food, alcohol, tobacco, buttons, and hats. The roaring artillery of the Great War was replaced with a fitting silence. Wounded and fallen soldiers were able to be carried back to their lines. Amazingly, joint burial services were held. Accounts of opposing soldiers playing football on Christmas Day soon became lore. This impromptu truce amidst the most brutal of warfare stands as a jaw-dropping example of humanity and goodwill against all odds. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.